Hey everyone, welcome to week 6 of class. I'm trying something new today. I've got my camera on so that you get to see my face a little bit and we can interact a little bit more. I love your feedback if you think it's something that makes a difference or if it doesn't make a difference to you at all. But all your week 5 work is graded and in the grade book. So your quizzes, your discussion boards that were on Hannah Hawk and Ai Weiwei, the whole idea of new media. Some really interesting ideas present there. Most of you said that you thought that Hannah Hawk's style would definitely be relevant today. And it's always an interesting discussion because there's definitely this idea of, some of the subject matter she's dealing with is definitely in the historical context of her moment in history. And yet, if we were to take her technique and what she's doing and apply it today, I think we would see that it would be incredibly relevant. We're used to really fast-paced images in this day and age, and if you think about the natural evolution of media, it kind of has progressed in a very common sense way from what Hawk was doing, that she was using what was on the cutting edge for her in that moment, and we're doing that now today. So things like memes and GIFs, these images, things like Snapchat, where these images are very quick, right? We're consuming them very quickly and rapidly. I think that's what Hawk was trying to do in a way in her moment in history. So some interesting discussions going on there, and of course with Weiwei and his incarceration, and him really standing up and making a statement with his work and with the way he uses social media to represent this idea of freedom of speech, I think is a really important one. And I think all of you agreed that his incarceration was a very unfortunate thing, but it actually has drawn so much attention to him almost in a positive way because of that. And it's cool to see artists take something that is considered a negative in their lives and turn it into something that can be restorative for society. And that's really what art, to me, should be about taking what's going on, taking all the good and all the junk, exploring it. Artists, I always say, explore externally, where a lot of us explore internally. We have our ideas that we're kind of thinking of here, and they're thinking in an external way because of the media they're creating. And it's cool to see that happening as it happens. So good job there. Really nice job on your collages. A lot of you, I saw some good influence from Hawk and her work. So be looking at those, look at your feedback. Let me know if you have any questions there. Always quiz grades too. If you want to go over any questions on the quiz, I don't take the time in these announcements because they would just be really long to go over each question of the quiz. But I do want you to know that you have that option always, that if you're going through your quiz grade and there's a question that you're just not quite understanding why you got it wrong or didn't understand what I was really looking for or asking in the beginning, send me an email. Let's talk about it. I'm here to do that with you. Okay, week 6. I love this week. I think it's a really interesting one. It's got some really out there intense material, and that is okay. We're just going to engage with it anyway. We're going to be reading it's kind of more of an interview, but it reads in essay format by a man named Michel Foucault. And Foucault is a postmodern theorist. He wrote this in 1967. He's no longer living. He was a very, very strange, out there kind of guy, but did some really influential work in the art world and in art theory. And we're going to read his essay called Heterotopias. And I've given you a web link below. Sorry, I had to find it. Here it is. It's here below in the read section. And so I want you to go ahead and read that. It's not terribly long, but what I've done, because this is probably one of the most intense things you're going to read all these 8 weeks. And again, I'm not saying that to scare you, but I want you to be prepared and go into it to just dive in and get something really interesting out of it. So what I've done is I've included a PDF file here, and if you open that up, it looks like this. And it's just some lecture slides that I have done and gone through to help break down some of the ideas that Foucault is talking about throughout this essay and kind of some of the questions that I want you to be considering as you go through it. So that should be helpful, kind of, do a side by side, I would, with those. And again, this is a tough one, but dive in and let me know if you have questions specifically. If you know, get into say his third principle and you're just, oh, I'm not really quite sure what's going on there. Can you explore this with me? I love doing that. I love when students ask me questions about content like that, not just about, you know, grades, and which you're of course welcome to do at all times. But I love having those discussions with students. So dive in there, and you have an extra credit assignment this week. So this is completely optional. It must be completed no later than day 7 of week 7. So you don't just have carte blanche to do this and finish it whenever you want up till the end of class. And that's for my sake, to make sure I don't have tons and tons of extra grading to do when we get to the end of the class. So by the end of next week, this has to be submitted. And any day past that, sorry, I won't grade it. So I want you to view film clips on photographer Stephen Shore by clicking here, and it will take you to a video. I think you have to go out of Blackboard. Yep, and it's a YouTube clip. Let me just check it. Yep, make sure it is in fact working. Really interesting guy. Doing photography of Americana. He was actually really young when he was a part of Andy Warhol's factory. So he's got some really interesting stories, but he's someone that's really cool to engage with, especially when it comes to this idea of heterotopias. And as you'll find out when you're reading about this, it really has a lot to do with this idea of space, that we tend to think that, you know, our issues in life are all about this lack of time. But Foucault has this interesting idea that it's all about space and how we use space, and that time is related always to the way we're interacting with different spaces in our life. So this is done as a reflection journal. And so you would follow the link under this Learn Activities. You would just click here and it would open up your journal entry. And this is what I would want you to engage with. So after you've read Heterotopias, watch the clip on Stephen Shore. Do you think that heterotopias exist today? Remember, this was written in 1967, but I think it's actually incredibly relevant today. How does this knowledge help you understand the way we use visual space? And how might the work of Stephen Shore be considered heterotopic? So this is really a heavy theory one, and this is why I make this extra credit. It's something that I want you to go for if you're going to engage with it. Okay, we have our next create assignment this week. This one is really fun, and go into it with a good attitude. Every once in a while I get students who have a bad attitude going into this one, and then they don't enjoy this project. But if you go into it really open-minded and with a good attitude, I think you're going to find it a nice break. It's a good one to kind of do as a family. If you have small children, this is something that you can definitely involve them in. So since we're talking about place and space this week, I wanted us to look at a very iconic artist out of the UK, a contemporary artist named Andy Goldsworthy, and he's an earth artist. Everything he makes is out of natural materials, everything is outdoors, and everything therefore is temporal, because these materials of course eventually will fade away. Some of them are not, some of them are made out of stone, and it's kind of these monolithic type works that are meant to stand the test of time, like we know from kind of ancient civilizations. And so he's of course commenting on that as well. But go ahead and watch this clip. It's just a short clip. I think it's only 6 or 7 minutes long, but it's going to show you his process, and he's out in nature making something, and that's what you're going to be doing. So it's winter. If you're in California, you've hopefully got better weather than we do here, although the sun is shining here in Nashville, Tennessee today, even though it's in the 40s. We've had a very mild winter. But this is a chance to kind of get outside, you know, throw on a jacket and breathe some fresh air. So you can watch the clip here, or you can follow this link, and this is the instructions for your assignment. So you're going to use only natural materials. These can be leaves in your backyard, branches in the park, seashells on the beach, whatever it might be. You're going to use creative problem solving to complete 3 earth sculptures to photograph and submit. So I've given examples below of Goldsworthy's work. You can see a few of them here. So you can see how everything is done with natural materials, but he's manipulating, he's changing them He's putting them in patterns. He's not just putting, photographing a flower on the ground, right? So let's step out in our creativity a little bit. And I've also given you this link here that you can follow that are going to give more examples of his work. So, get out there on the internet, look at all of his stuff, really glean some good influence before you get outside. So after you finish doing your own 3 sculptures, you're going to do these brief write-ups for it. And so answer the following questions about your experience making these. So number 1, describe the experience you had doing this project. What was the most challenging part of creating them? Maybe you went into it with kind of an attitude of, oh, this is going to be really easy, and then found that it was more challenging than you thought, or vice versa. So talk us through your process. Number 2, reread Foucault's 3rd principle about the theater and the garden. And how are your sculptures similar? Are you creating a world within a world? So I want you to pull that theory from Foucault in here. Number 3, has doing this project changed the way you think about artists like Andy Goldsworthy? Why or why not? You may already have had a strong opinion that you love this kind of art and these kind of artists, or you may be like, I don't really get it. I don't think it looks that hard or that challenging. And, sometimes it takes us getting out and tangibly working with these materials ourselves and doing what these artists are doing to appreciate their technique, their skill. I always talk to students too about artists like Jackson Pollock that they think, what, he just splattered paint. And I always encourage them, do it yourself and find that there's actually an interesting process that goes on there. And of course, in a historical context, he was doing something incredibly new and something that was relevant to his historical moment and the art theory that was going on at the time and what was going on politically and culturally. It all ties in always. Oops, excuse my phone. So number 4, find at least one biblical reference that can pair well with the images of your sculpture. So I want you to be thinking about that relationship between religion and the natural world, about this whole idea of creationism and how this could almost be an act of worship and a celebration of what God has created. So how do your images communicate the message found in these scriptures? So answers, I'm looking 2 to 6 sentences in length for each of these. Or on the side of 4, 5, 6 of them. If you're giving me just 2 brief sentences and I feel like you could really dig in and explore these more, I'm going to notice that. So be sure you proofread your work before you submit it. Okay, so this is a really fun project. Have a good time with that. So we are writing again this week. We've got a paper due, and that's why this I changed this reflection to extra credit. So maybe it's something you want to put off till next week to start working on if it's something that you really want to make sure you get done. And that way you can focus on your create assignment and on your film review. So last week I talked briefly about this and wanted to make sure that you picked a film, watched it, and read through the prompt and took notes on the film according to what we want to be discussing and looking for in these prompts. So I'm going to go over these in a little bit more detail. So from this point on, you may want to just skip to the part in this video where it's relevant to the film you're talking about. So just kind of wrapping up everything else, you have your quiz, as always. You have your Create Earth sculptures, and you have your film review that are due this week, okay? Extra credit isn't due till the end of week 7. Okay. So thanks everyone there, and then we're going to dive in the rest of this time, and you can just pick and choose for what film is relevant to you. So, Passion of the Christ. I'm sure many of you have seen this film at some point. It's not one that you just really kind of get excited and sit down and think, oh, I'm relaxing Tuesday night, I want to watch Passion of the Christ. But it's an important one. It's kind of one of those that we know is important to watch, and we go into it with that intentionality. So things I'd like you to think about here. Number 1, how does the new media of film affect the delivery of a timeless story? So we're doing specifically film reviews here, right? We're not just doing narrative reviews or book review. We're doing this about a film. So we want to consider how this timeless story of Scripture is interpreted through the medium of film. Consider camera angles, montage scenes, flashbacks. Give me at least 3 examples of how film specifically is effective in delivering this story to its audience. Number 2, what is the theme here? So consider the rise, the climax, and the fall of action, because all good stories have that, right? And in film format, we usually see that. We see an introduction, we see that there's a conflict, we see the storyline rise, we see that climax, that kind of event that, that tipping point that turns everything for all the characters and shapes their responses. And then we see that fall of action and that conclusion, right? So how do these thematic elements influence the audience's perspective? Number 3, how does the idea of authorship, so authorship of scripture, so we're talking about the divine intervention of God with man, of scripture coming to life, right? In this tangible book. And interpretation through this film by Mel Gibson, who directed this, right? And he, wrote the screenplay, produced it. He was very involved. This was kind of his own passion project, right? No pun intended. And so how does this idea of authorship and then interpretation play into storytelling as a whole? Does it change the way we understand these stories? The means of delivery. We've talked a lot about that already, about new media is new means of delivering the same information, right? What artistic liberties are taken here? Give at least 3 examples of elements that are found in the film that may not be found in scripture, and then consider why he might have included those moments. And number 4, who was the target audience for the film and why? This one isn't just a simple, the target audience was. I want you to really engage and think about that, because there always is an intended audience for all of our media, whether it's a photograph. If you're posting on Instagram, you have a specific audience in mind, or who you're talking to on Facebook, and you might change what you post or your tone depending on who you know is going to be engaging with you. So consider that here as well. Okay, moving on. Your second option is The True Cost, a really brilliant documentary that came out in 2016 on Netflix. And all of these are available on Netflix, by the way. And this one is all about the fashion industry, so really relevant one. It's all about consumerism in today's culture. So I want you to engage with this concept of fast fashion that they talk about throughout the documentary. So what is the concept of fast fashion, and how is it affecting our economy on a global scale? So really think about how what you buy right now can affect someone 5,000 miles away from you, and how there is a direct correlation there. Give at least 3 examples of this cause and effect. Number 2, in what way are advertising and visual culture contributing to the way we consume this clothing? Give at least 3 examples from the film or from your own research. So really here, consider that power of the image and of advertising, of commercials, of new media. Social media is really, if you follow any fashion bloggers, there's a whole new Instagram kind of program almost called Like to Know It. And when you like images that have been set up with this Like to Know It, you will receive an email that will tell you where to buy everything that person is wearing. So it's really interesting. It's become very tactile, this whole idea of advertising. And that definitely shapes our lifestyles and how we think about the things that we need to buy and how we consume items like clothing. Number 3, how can consumers affect change in this current model? And they talk a lot about this in the film. As experts pose it in the film, consuming more can have a negative effect on your psyche. Can a change in your consumption habits improve your well-being? How can it improve the well-being of others? Another documentary you might really enjoy that's on Netflix right now, if you watch this and just think, I really want to explore these ideas more, is one called Minimalism. So there's this interesting idea and movement right now that has a lot to do with visual culture. It has to do with fashion. It has to do with interiors, how we shape our homes, how we consume product. And that all, kind of ties into our historic cultural moment. And number 4, as Christians, what is our moral obligation when it comes to consuming goods? Is there one? Do you think there is one at all? What's our obligation to the environment? So maybe do some research here, pull some scripture in. So I love this film, and I think that this is a really interesting prompt to engage with and very, very relevant in 2017. Okay, your third option is The Little Prince, and if you have small children, this is such a good one. I had my niece and nephew come over and watch it, and they're so used to watching, these kids shows that are such rapid fire, quick, lots of color, flash, lots of noise. And this is done a little bit differently, and yet they were so engaged in this film. We actually watched half of it one night, and they just couldn't wait to come back over and finish it the next week that we got to see them. So really good one if you want to kill two birds with one stone and have a movie night with your family. Okay, so things to think about here. So I want you to describe how this film illustrates the idea that film is first a visual medium before anything else, before it's a narrative medium, before it's about sound, anything else, it's all about the visual. So consider the pros and cons of translating. This is a beloved classic book, a children's book that was written in France right at the tail end of World War II, and it was really designed to help children cope with loss. So consider how there are pros and cons of translating a beloved classic book to film. What can a film offer that a book cannot, and what can a book offer that a film cannot? Number two, what is nostalgia? And how is the concept of nostalgia present in this film? So I don't want just a dictionary definition of nostalgia. Webster's dictionary says that nostalgia is. Go further with it. Do some research here. This is a very interesting concept and theory, and I've done a lot of writing about this, actually. I want you to consider how nostalgia is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a not so good thing. But regardless, it's a very powerful thing, and it's something that we all engage in. And it's all about filling a void a little bit. So interesting, just kind of giving you a few little nuggets there. So this will require research beyond a dictionary definition of nostalgia. I want you to consider how it's very powerful on our psyche. Number three, how is symbolism present in the film? Be specific. I want you to give at least 3 examples from the film. And why are these symbols important to the characters? What is their function in the story? Can any of these symbols reflect a Christian narrative? Why or why not? So I'm kind of trying to spoon feed you some ideas here of what I want you to be looking for. Number 4, how does this film deviate from reality? So Pixar, for one, is famous for all their films deviate from reality, and they all have a sense of magic. This isn't a Pixar film, but it follows a little bit of that model. So how does this film give the viewers a sense of magic, even though there is no magic technically present? There's no wave of a wand. There's no spell being cast. There's no witches and wizards or fairies. But there is definitely a sense of magic in the film. Think of Up. There's a flying house. Monsters, Inc. is all about this imaginary monster world. Toy Story, so toys that come to life. And yet there's no fairy godmother that brings the toys to life, right? So there's always this idea of magic and deviating from reality, but in a very natural way. So consider how that's present in this story as well. So 3 good options to engage with. Let me know if you have specific questions about any of these films, if you want to just bounce some ideas off of me as well. And I just want to say you guys are doing such an awesome job this class. I've really enjoyed reading all of your work and viewing your projects. Keep it up. We've got 3 weeks left, and have a really great week.